Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at this conversations we're about to have on leadership comms at Land, metrics, KPI, and the strategy. We're going to give it about 30 seconds, and then we will get started. Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. Lovely Tuesday, wherever you guys are.
Hopefully it's a little warmer for other people than
Yes,
it is for us here.
yes. It's a balmy 20 degrees outside right now. So,
Oh, it's 25 now? I think it was in
uh,
single digits this morning, but
yes, yes.
my
Very
eyelashes
cold.
were getting icicles on them.
Awesome. We'll give it a few more seconds. I see a bunch of people joining, which is great. We're going to have an awesome conversation today with lots of participation, and it's going to be a good time. So give it a few more seconds and we'll get going here.
And exciting that we're in teams for the first time for the
Yes.
first conversation.
Awesome. So we'll get started. My name is Paul Stewart. I'm an account manager here at Polite Mail. Alongside me is Melissa Katsky-Berry. She is the Vice President of Account Management. A couple COMMSversations reminders. Please mute yourself while the conversation is happening. I think everyone is currently on mute now, which is great. However, if you do want to join in on the fun and the conversation, which we do highly recommend, please feel free to unmute yourself. You can turn your camera on if you want. We would love it for as much participation as possible. This is really a great opportunity to not only talk to us, but talk to other Polite Mail customers along the way. You can also use the Q&A feature to type in responses, questions, and comments. If you're not comfortable enough talking um, on the actual webinar, but we do want to recommend that you guys do unmute and chime in. A recording of the session will be sent out in the follow-up email and will be available on our VIP lounge. If you don't have access to your VIP lounge, please reach out to your account manager and we can get you the login for that VIP lounge. And most importantly, the session is really for you to get the most out of Polite Mail. So please don't be shy about joining in on the conversation. The more the merrier. So let's get going. At the beginning of your registration, we asked this question: what are some of the challenges you face when it comes to sending on behalf of a leader? And these were your answers. We got a bunch of different answers here that I'd like to kind of dissect a little bit if we have the opportunity to. We see approval time, obtaining final approval, and getting them to not include a 5-paragraph preamble before getting to the point. Catchy headlines that sounds like they want to read, but also CEO worthy. Melissa, any of these catch your eye at all?
Yeah, you already mentioned the one with the 5-paragraph preamble. That one made me chuckle a little bit. Um, but I think a lot of leadership really likes to talk and have that very wordy email. And what that reminded me of is that we actually did a case study with Bayer a few years ago, and they had a very similar issue. I'm sure everyone here has that same issue, and some of their recommendations were interesting. The communications team would have to counsel and negotiate with the people who were insisting that their messages, had to go to all employees, or they needed to include this or that in the email. And so they pushed back with specific questions. So it may be, I think, hard to push back on leadership sometimes, depending on the type of relationship or the type of culture at your company. But if you make it part of the process that when we send an email out, these are the questions that need to be answered before we confirm that yes, we're going to include this content, then it can make it a little easier to get that through. So they would ask, like, why do you want to do that? Who is this message about? Who does this message affect? What are we trying to get them to do? How do we best appeal to that group? Is email the best route for this communication, or should it go, on the intranet or on, if you have like a mobile app, something like that? So that one stood out to me. And I wanted to see if any other of our customers here had a similar situation to that, or if they have any tips for anyone who might be struggling to get their leadership to cut back on that 5 paragraph preamble.
Yeah, let's open it up to the floor. If you have any thing that you want to add to what Melissa was just mentioning, or you even see your response on this page, unmute. We'd love to hear from you guys and hear what your thoughts are on in regards to this. Don't be shy.
That first one is always the hardest. The
Hey
first
guys,
unmuter.
my name is Nicole Sharma, and one thing that helps me a lot is I will just write it and get them to okay what I've written, and then have them just read what I've written, so that I'm not having to wait for them, and
Hmm.
they'll likely approve what I've written, and then I'll just use what I have and continue on. So I'm waiting for approval, but not really because I already have what I'm waiting on approval for.
Okay,
Right.
that's awesome. Nicole, do you find it hard, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but do you find it hard to do kind of voice and tone or with brevity when you're putting together your email from your leader?
It can be tricky, but depending on the nature of the work that you're doing, they likely already have examples of things that they have publicly spoken about somewhere in the world. So for any given calendar year, they have goals and strategies that they're working for. I usually just try to stick to the same umbrella topics and then just go down the rabbit hole with whatever their goals and strategies were. It takes a little bit of like reading some previous things or watching some
Hmm.
previous videos, but once you do that a couple of times, you'll know what they would and wouldn't say, and then based on whatever the topic is that you're writing your particular email or newsletter for, in this moment, you can just expand upon some of the topics that they've already talked about. Leadership doesn't really stray too far from the mark when it comes to communicating their voice to a thing. So you should be fine with just sticking with what they've done before and maybe just expanding on it in that specific way. That's what I do anyway.
Oh,
That's
that's
yeah.
awesome. I love that. Go ahead, Melissa.
I was gonna say that's a really good tip. Basically like studying your leadership, right? And so
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
write as them.
And the
Does
more you
anyone
get it
have,
right, the less
yeah,
they need you to, the more they'll begin to trust you. And then the
right.
less you're having to wait for them to approve because you've already gotten it right before. So then
Hmm.
in the future times, it's like, oh, well, you've done this before. Like, just, you know what I would say, just write something along those lines. And now you kind of become a slight subject matter expert for what that work is rather than having to wait for them all the time.
Yeah, you're like they're a
Gain
trusted
in the trust.
advisor.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly.
Awesome. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to this in terms of the voice or anything else in terms of
I
sending from
see
a leader?
I see
Oh,
Deborah
Deborah.
raising her hand.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Hello. I just read an article about this in Reagan's Communications today. One piece that was shared is to break things down into bullets. But what I've always found is if you can get what you want, the action item and the call to or the call to action or the response in the first 2 paragraphs, that will help it with engagement. But we tie everything in our healthcare communications that I work for into what's the strategic goal and what is the value that is connected to. We summarize that. So right away, we level set what the communications are for and the action item that you need to do, especially with email overload. We have found getting that information right up in front, sort of the reverse funnel. But I believe that it really does help with engagement. And I found polite mail, when we put the link right at the top, I can tell which communications are linked to the quickest because you have great metrics.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that goes hand in hand with our best practices. So you're following our best practices, and basically like put the most important content at the top or like above the fold in an email. What would show up when they click on the email, and it's just showing in their preview pane, everything at the top there so that they can
Yes.
take action right away.
As my colleague Steve would say, give away the ending of the movie before you give away the plot line. He said that one time to me, and it has stuck. So I thank you for that, Steve, who I know is in the call. So, Bob, you have your hand raised. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, kind of on a similar line. I also work in healthcare, and oftentimes we will end up sending a message that comes from multiple leaders. So, there's 3 or 4 names assigned to it. And getting them to a point of agreement on information is definitely challenging, and especially when it comes to the length of it. And so, kind of similar to what the previous participant mentioned, if they won't give on their preamble, we might just kind of force a summary section at the top, basically saying, here are the 2 top line things you need to know, or the call to action. It could be bullet points, something like that. And then, hey, you can have your 5 paragraphs or whatever right after that, but we have found a way to just jam in the most important information at the top without disrupting, in theory, the flow of the message that they want to have.
Yep,
Awesome.
that's a great idea as well.
Steve, you have your hand raised. Go right ahead.
I do. This actually just came up for me earlier today. And so I wanted to ask Bob and everyone else, when you're going through that process, and my question to me earlier was just about one C-suite individual, and you seem to be dealing with multiple on one communication. Do you put a timeline or a time limit on their, like, do you cap that approval or that time frame for how long they can rewrite something and rewrite something and rewrite something? Or, when you send it to them, do you say, okay, this has to be done by this time? And how do you control the number of rewrites, if you will, to kind of speed up that process of everybody feeling like they have to add something to it, or they have to change something in the text or something like that? Do you have like a timeline that you give them?
I can start. Yes, we try. We will put in the subject line something like, for review by date, time, something like that. Now, when there are 4 leaders involved, it's not uncommon to actually only hear from 2 of them. And so we basically just say, we will just state our expectations in the message draft when we send it to them, and say, once we've heard from X number of people, and when the deadline lands, we will send this message. So we just have to make the expectations really clear. And sometimes the brakes still get thrown on, but other times we're able to just go ahead and roll with the things as planned.
Awesome. Sarah, go right ahead.
I was going to share, I have a similar experience. Oftentimes when we, have requests from leaders or they want to send out a message, it's coming from them and it starts with them. And so that timeline starts with them. So I think it's catering back to that, as saying like, here was our goal, here's the date we want to hit. And to your point, we'll say, for review by this date, and continue to move it on. The other thing, in terms of the preamble, I like to just take it and put it into AI and have AI tell me how long it's going to take for someone to read that. I think we know, like, just as communications practitioners, that we can't keep people's attention for that long. And so that's a good example of how we can use data to kind of inform them and help shorten it. Is like, if we include all this, it's going to take 5 minutes for them to read it, and we know they only stay consuming that information for about 3 minutes or whatever that time is. But often that can help sway and shorten content when they realize how long this actually does take for people to read it.
That's
And
awesome. Go ahead, Melissa.
You're probably going to say what I was going to say, Paul, but we also have that feature available in polite mail. So you don't, whichever is easier for you. but if you send yourself a pre-flight of the message, if you just like put that text in an email, send a pre-flight, and then look at that report, it'll tell you at the top of the report how long you can expect it would take an average reader to read the message.
The
We also have
report
on
on like an online viewing of after you send the test.
Yeah,
in the
so you would
in the metrics report, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the
Okay.
metrics report, or if you're using Polite Mail Online, we actually have a button that says calculated time to read right before you send a message. So that is a feature that is on Polite Mail Online as well. So
That's good to know.
if you need to learn more about that, let us know. We can definitely show you for sure.
And
Awesome.
I was thinking, does anyone use the best practices guidelines that Polite Mail puts out to put limits on their leaders? Like, you figure out that the message is going to take 5 minutes to read, and Polite Mail recommends that messages are 2 minutes or shorter. Does anyone kind of do that, or do you just say, like, this is too long, it's 5 minutes to read? If not,
Go ahead,
just an
Kimberly.
idea.
You're
Yeah.
up. The floor is yours.
Hey, I would say our team used best practices. We actually, at least we did it last year. I'm not sure we did this year. We had like pulled the analytics for each org's messages, and it showed like readability, click rate, and compared it to where we should be at, and then gave recommendations on how we can improve, because senior leaders love data, so you just can't be coming to them with personal feelings. You need to come to them with facts. So we can bring that to
Really
them,
do.
like, look, this 5-minute message is not getting high readability. Let's kind of go towards best practices. So yeah, it's great to present facts with your messages to make them lean towards what they need to improve upon.
Yeah, and that's what Polite Mail is here for, and that's what this conversation today is all about. We're actually going to be sharing a little bit more later in the presentation about like some key metrics that we recommend reporting to leadership, but we'd love to hear you all's input as well of like what metrics your leadership is interested in. And so we'll share it. That was another one of the questions that we asked in the registration. So we'll share all the responses, and then we can talk about that in detail as well. Because that's what Polite Mail is all about.
Yes, awesome. And if there's any slides that anyone wants to jump in on as we move forward, feel free to jump in, raise your hand, just unmute, go right ahead. This conversation is going great. So who are you sending from? We have many of you guys have already seen this slide before on many occasions, but as you know, employees will give 7% more attention to names who are not the senders. So if you're sending from a recognized leader, a CEO, a CFO, or any of the C-suite leaders, you're going to get 7% more attention than sending from a generic like HR box or communications inbox or communications in email and whatnot. And we're also seeing that emails sent from and to the same audience lose about 2% readership for each increase in frequency. So the more you send from that same audience, you're gonna lose about 2%. So if you can kind of keep it fresh and new, that's what tends to be a little bit better.
And I have a question I want to pose to the audience on that slide. Has anyone? I've heard from some customers that like leadership won't let them send from their email address, so they're forced to send from like a generic mailbox. Has anyone run into that issue, and have you been able to get around that, or any concerns with just like sending on behalf of or sending from a leader? Kind of going back in line with like how to gain leadership's trust, like we were talking about earlier. Go ahead, Ricky.
So not necessarily the same thing, but kind of. One of the things that we do is that we actually have alias mailboxes. So instead of sending directly from the leader themselves, we have kind of a masked mailbox. It's technically a shared mailbox through Outlook, right? But it's basically their first initial and then last name, right? So it's comes from the leader, but it's not their actual personal mail. And what's interesting is well, some people realize that it's us. Most actually don't. And so it gives us the opportunity to manage responses, forward things to them if they need to, right? So if somebody writes back thinking that it's them, which does happen sometimes, we kind of forward those accordingly. But it also means that like you're not getting tons of responses going directly to a leader, and it gives us the opportunity to manage that. So I'm kind of curious if that, I mean, I know that for us, I feel like maybe 50-50 of those who realize that it's actually like the communications team sending on behalf of a leader versus those who actually think it is truly the leader. But I would almost wonder if that affects the attention rate versus sending, as you said, like it tends to be a little bit lower if it's coming from like the more generic mailbox that we might use for, general communication, HR, things like that.
It would be, yeah. I feel like those people that maybe realize it's coming from the comms team might cause them to like pay less attention, and the people who are like, oh, it's coming from our CEO, I have to open that. Like people, that's what gets people to open it. But I do wonder, like you said, how many people at your organization know that it's the comms team or just think it's the leader. It would be interesting if you could do it like a test, like, but that might kind of tip everyone off to what you're doing. Like if you could test sending from the leader's actual email address versus the alias that you set up and see which gets better results. There is a way in Polite Mail to direct replies to a different email address. So even if you do send from the leader's actual email, there's a setting where you can direct replies to like your communications inbox. And you also have the ability to suppress auto replies. So if you didn't want the leader to get all of the out of office messages, that's something you can set up as well. So if you're ever interested in testing that out, and you want help on setting up those two settings, just let your account manager know and we can help with that. But I think that's a really good
actually
workaround.
mention, Melissa, is those two settings, because I have a question, and feel free to just raise your hand if you don't want to talk. But by a show of hands, or chime in, who has anxiety around sending from a leader? Because that absolutely, I've heard that on many occasions. Yes, I'm seeing hands raised all over the place. I hear that a lot. People are worried that they're going to get all the bounce backs. People are worried that they're going to, people are going to respond right directly to the leader instead of to the communications box. And we, with Polite Mail, we have those awesome features where you can do the direct replies to and the suppress auto replies. So you don't. It should hopefully reduce your anxiety from sending from a recognized leader a little bit, which is that's what we're trying to hopefully get you guys to overcome, is that send anxiety from sending from from a leader. So glad that we're all in that same boat of you do get some anxiety about around sending. So awesome.
You have a little to share about that, right, Paul?
I do, and in just a little bit we do. Perfect. So we talked about it a little bit, but capturing the voice and tone. And feel free to jump in and add how you guys capture the voice and tone of your leader. But capturing voice and tone from a specified leader is really important, in my opinion, and I'm sure Melissa would agree, because you want it to sound like it's coming from that leader. You want it to sound like it's coming directly directly to your employees, and it's important information. So I want to pose the question: how are you guys capturing voice and tone in your emails from your leaders? Because I'm sure other people could use those tools moving forward.
Yeah, and that was actually the biggest response of like, what are some of the challenges you face? Most people said capturing voice and tone. So any tips that anyone has to share, be greatly appreciated.
We also wanted to provide you guys with some AI example prompts for tone and voice. I won't, you guys are going to get this deck afterwards, so I won't go over each and every single one of them. But these are just some prompts that you can use for AI. And yes, we know AI can be scary. And I was actually just having this conversation with my wife this morning because she hates AI. She is absolutely anti-AI, and I kept on telling her, listen, AI is just another tool that we can have in our toolbox. It's not going to replace human creativity. And it's not going to replace what we can write in emails. It can help us. It can help us sound more professional. It can help us get across points, but it's not going to erase that human creativity. So, anyone using AI out there for your emails, especially your emails to their leaders? If so, I would love to hear about that.
So I use AI not necessarily to write on their behalf, but more so for editing purposes, just because I love AI, but I would never trust it enough to just totally capture its voice. And then when it comes to my leaders capturing their voice, one, just having that one-on-one time or hearing the way they speak in meetings. And then obviously if you're writing the message, share it with them. They're very like good at like, okay, I don't want to sound corporate-y and use these high level words. I want to sound conversational and keep it a little bit more casual. So it's really like having that one-on-one interaction really helps with capturing their voice because, it helps with their personality and the notes. And then another thing that we do when it comes to sending messages on behalf of generic mailboxes, we say a message from that leader so that they know it's coming from the senior leader instead of coming from like just a generic, comms person. So that helps a lot. I know that
Okay.
was a lot of answers for one question.
Yeah, Kimberly, do you see higher metric rates when you send a message from the leader compared to another message that you typically would send throughout the week?
Absolutely. When they see that name, just seeing that name in the subject line, it's automatically like, okay, let me see what they got to say.
Okay, awesome. Sarah, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I use AI all the time to get a first draft of messages on behalf of my leader. It does take some specific prompting about, kind of words that I found over time that I would use to describe their tone and style. I've also heard of, and we don't have the ability to do this where I work, but there is another company that I've heard of that's using AI, like prompt engineering, to build chatbots that are mimicking the voices of leadership. So what you do is you upload a bunch of examples, whether that's transcripts or previous emails that have gone out, and then that can create a draft using their voice for the next
Okay.
thing you're writing. So that's kind of a similar practice I do is I'll upload like previous examples of comms and then give it some parameters around what I want. And then I think just even having it 15% of the way there to edit is easier than starting from zero. So to the previous point, I wouldn't trust it entirely to write it, but it's great to get words on paper. So I often do that to start it out with AI. I just think it's an easier way to get things rolling. And then I could definitely tell what I don't like or what doesn't sound like them. Um, and then I just kind of as a best practice, I try to read it in my head like they're saying it. If it doesn't sound like something they would say out loud, that's how I know I need to continue to edit and make changes.
Okay.
So I just try to picture their voice as I'm reading it, not my voice, even though oftentimes it's coming from us.
Absolutely. Sarah, what just out of curiosity, what AI program are you using? Is it Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT? Which one are you guys using?
We use Copilot, but we also have an in-house AI bot here that can deal with, that confidential information, which is helpful because it's within our walls. A lot of times, there's stuff inside these messages that's too soon to be shared or put into Copilot. So that may be a unique opportunity that I have there.
I'm seeing a lot of companies having their own AI chatbots. So I think that's really interesting. My husband's company had one or has one. But like you said, you mentioned like a company doing something else that you're not able to. I was going to say definitely check your company's AI usage policy before you start doing that, which I'm sure you all have. But companies are having to put in like specific AI usage into their HR documents now, I know. And, even at Polite Mail, we're putting, AI language in our contracts. So it's definitely creating a unique situation, but a great opportunity. Like Paul said, it's another tool in your toolbox. I'm typically on the side of don't use AI as much, but I am seeing more use for it, especially when I have like a mental block and I'm just like you said, getting words on paper. If I just need to get it started, it's really good. And then that usually like jogs the mental juices for me.
I tend to use AI. I like using AI. Not that I'm not great at writing emails, but I tend to just mumble and go on and ramble, I guess you will. So
Ramble,
I
yeah.
always I
You
tend
have
to
a
like to use AI.
5-paragraph preamble.
Correct. I tend to use AI if I need to make something a little bit more professional or whatnot, and I do. I really enjoy AI. Unlike my wife, who doesn't, and Melissa, who's not the biggest fan of AI, but it is going to be the way of the world. So you just got
Yep.
to learn how to use it.
Yep. And
Um,
like we said, it can be good for, maybe not the specific content, but the tone and voice, matching that up
correct.
to leadership when you're having to write on behalf of someone else. And that can also
Absolutely.
reduce the amount of like back and forth you have with the leader. If, you write it already in their tone and you send it to them, like we were talking about at the beginning of the presentation, once they gain that trust, then you can kind of just go out on your own.
And we all know that getting tone and voice can cause a lot of send anxiety. So the next few slides, we do have a couple slides on how to deal with send anxiety and getting dealing with urgency and approval times I just wanted to share with you guys. This is from a previous webinar that I've done, and I personally love talking about send anxiety, especially with my customers, because it's real. Everyone has it. Even I have it, and I don't send on behalf of leaders. But there's some tips that you guys can utilize to reduce sending anxiety. One being using email templates. Using email templates tends to streamline communications and reduce that anxiety, because what you're using. You don't have to recreate the wheel, if you will, every time. You have that base template that you're going to use, and it's plug and play. You can change it up a little bit to kind of keep it creative and new and catch the eye of the reader, but the use of email templates can severely reduce your sending anxiety. Getting feedback from colleagues. We talk about it a lot using pre-flight test sends. Getting feedback from a trusted colleague can build confidence, which improves message quality. That goes along the same lines of sending from a leader. If you want to build that confidence with that leader, feel free to reach out if you have that relationship with your leader and say, hey, what do you think of this? How do you think this sounds? Building that confidence. We've already heard it earlier in the conversation that eventually, once you build that confidence with your trusted leader or your leader, they're going to be like, yeah, just go ahead. I trust you. I trust that you're going to get out the message that I need to get out. So get feedback from your colleagues, and really set realistic expectations. I talk about this all the time with a lot of my customers. Getting 100% open rate and getting response times out there are great. However, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to get 100% open rate. There's going to be people that don't open the email or open it up for just less than 3 seconds. It's not going to happen. So you want to set that realistic expectation of saying, okay, typically my open rates are around 60%. Let's see if we can get up to about 65% on this end. I personally like to make it into a challenge or a game, if you will, because I'm a competitive person. I'm like, all right, we're gonna beat the last email we sent, but really set realistic expectations with response times. Then that really can alleviate pressure when sending from your leader or even from a generic inbox. Some other ways you can deal with this is limit the revision cycles. The more you go back and forth, changing things up, you have to get it out again to get approved. They come back with more revisions. you're losing time towards that deadline that you need to get that email out. So limit the revision cycles to create a clear path for final approval, and preventing overanalyzing before sending. We all can overanalyze sends, like the best of us, and sometimes it just can cause a lot of procrastination. So try to limit that revision cycle and utilize the sending calendar. Avoid conflicts with other sends and get a clear visibility into deadlines, and available time to prepare. So with Polite Mail, we do have a scheduled send calendar that you can actually mark on when you're actually going to send out a message before you send it out. So if it's called our editorial calendar, it's in Polite Mail, and you can go right in and you can just mark it and say going to be sending out such and such email at this time, even before you schedule the send, so people know in Polite Mail that you're sending out that message and not to overlap with other people. Melissa, do you have anything that you want to add in regards to sending anxiety?
Um, yeah, that editorial calendar, it's available in the newer versions of Polite Mail. So if you don't have access to that, let your account manager know. We'll get you upgraded. But that was a highly requested customer feature, where it is, like Paul said, you can see sends that are already scheduled to go out and sends that have been penciled in. So if you have a lot of users on your account, or even if there are just 5 of you, but you're all doing different sends at different times, definitely recommend using that so that you're not overlapping and sending at the same time, because the last thing you want to do is your message from the CEO goes out at the same time as someone else's newsletter, and they got there just a minute before you. So the CEO's message has to wait for that newsletter to go out first. And we all know that leadership does not like to wait. So definitely make sure that you're timing it right so that your message can go out as quickly as possible, from the CEO or from leadership.
So thank you. And then we added this quote, and I'm a theater person, but I'm a really bad theater person because I'm not a big William Shakespeare person, because I just think he tends to ramble. And this quote is very ironic because it tends to ramble. But the biggest thing you want to take from this quote is really, since brevity is the soul of wit, keep it brief. And that's all I'm going to say about this quote, because it's a long rambled quote, but you can break it down into 3 or 4 words. So keep it brief. So awesome. So at this point, I'm going to pass it to Melissa, and she's going to just talk more about some open rates, metrics, and all that good jazz.
Yeah, and to add to the keep it brief thing, that is our biggest best practice that we always, you can go back to the next slide, Paul. Our biggest best practice that we always recommend is keep your messages short, right? So we have this included in every best practices guide we put out each year, every presentation we do about it. We know that it's very hard for customers to, like we talked about earlier, get leadership to keep it brief. I think the idea of, even if they want a really long email, putting the most important, because you're really seeing a lot of readership drop off, as you see on this chart on the right, after 1 minute in length, which only is about 250 words. And every additional 250 words you add, you lose 10% more readership. So getting the most important content in at the beginning is the most important. A question for everyone here. We talked about some tips on keeping messages short. If there are any other tips that you all have for keeping messages short, whether it's your newsletter or a leadership communication, I think that's always one of the biggest challenges that our customers face. And on average, how do you all know how long your leadership messages are typically? And you might not know off the top of your head.
Too long.
Yeah. Yeah. Some other tips that we have tips in our best practices guide as well, which I'm sure you all, probably being customers, you know, for a while, probably have that best practices guide, but if not, we can send it out to you, and it's in your customer VIP lounge as well. But some tips we typically recommend are like including anchor links, or like dividing out sections with like clear, divisions, like white space within your email. So even if there are a lot of words, visually it looks just nicer than just a big block of text. So dividing with, some good images or good white space, or putting anchor links so people can jump to where they want to go within the message. And it's typically the newsletters that we see are really long, but those leadership communications can be rambling as well, we know. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how to get leadership to care about the data, right? So with Polite Mail, that is, our key benefit is providing you with accurate, insightful metrics that you can use to see how your communications are performing. And ideally, you want to share that information with your leadership team, either to show them how their messages are performing, or show them how much value you're adding to the organization as a communications team by getting your employees engaged. And if you have poor communication, there's a lot of costs to it. It's the biggest like dollar amount cost is turnover, right? So, if leadership can't communicate effectively with their employees, employees are going to be less engaged. They might be disgruntled even, and likely to leave the organization. They might have high stress and low morale. There's also, productivity loss if people are just not engaged with the work that they're performing. And on the other hand, if you're not communicating enough, it can lead to low engagement. If you're communicating too much, it can lead to information overload. And it's also important to just communicate any compliance or, compliance topics that need to be communicated with employees, because otherwise you open the company up for risk. So how does internal communications contribute to the company's larger goals? So this is a great time to open the floor up to discussion. If anyone has anything they want to share about, how they communicate or how they keep employees engaged, either, through general communications or specifically with leadership communications. Anything fun that like the leaders do in terms of communication to get employees involved, or anything like that. We'd love to hear it. And feel free to chime in later if something comes to mind. All right, so which metrics matter most to your leadership? This is another one of the questions that, do we have
double clicked on my
No worries. This is another question that we included in the registration, and these were the top answers. So I'm seeing a lot of reads, click-through rate, engagement rate, open rates in there a little bit, but mostly read rate, which I love to see. And then one person said that they don't ask for, their metrics. So
interesting.
Yeah, I'd love if that person is here and they want to share, or if anyone else has a similar situation or had a similar situation where leadership wasn't really on board with the data, but they got them on board with the data. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear about what the most important metrics are for your leader as well, because we're very curious on what metric leadership tends to pay attention to the most.
Yeah, I know I had a client the other day that was like, our leadership doesn't care at all about click-through rate. They just want to see read rate. Even if there are links in the email, they don't care. They just want to see how many people read it.
I do see a lot of there's a lot of open rates, open rate, read rate, open rate, read engage. Oh, Kimberly, you actually have a question or you're raising your hand. Go right ahead.
Hi, me again. So I
No,
would
I
say
love it.
definitely engagement and readability. But as far as like data, I haven't had a leader explicitly say I want to see the insight, but it's always good to just present it to them and make them understand, because sometimes leaders want to send messages just because it's the company's culture and it's like, do we really need to do this? And then you just show them data like, look, nobody's really reading or engaging the way you think. So maybe not necessarily stop, but we can lessen it and reconsider how we're doing it. So, and plus we support like, senior VP, they have like 10,000 things going on. So you just kind of bring the horse to water and then, help them drink a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that education is key because they might not understand. Like, I know Polite Mail has a metric called engagement rate, which they might not, obviously they're not going to know what that is until they're taught what it is. So that's a
actually
really good point.
my favorite metric, to be honest with you, because it really truly shows how engaged someone is in that email. I love it. I talk about engagement rate all the time. For those of my customers that have talked about engagement rate with me, you're probably sick of me saying it, but I love the engagement rate metric. It's my favorite. Everyone else has different favorite metrics that they're really liking and whatnot. I do, like I was saying, I do see a lot of open rate on here. Melissa, do you find that open rate is the best metric to use, or what do you think? Are there any metrics that might be better than open rate?
Yes. You can jump to the next slide, actually. So I don't think open rate is the best metric for, seeing how engaged your audience is with the actual content. So open rate is good for like that first step, right? Open rate is going to show you what your overall audience reach is. You'll probably notice that open rate doesn't really differ regardless of what type of communication you send, because if people are going to open the message, 80% of the people that you send it to are going to open the message regardless. And an open is calculated when they land on the message, when the content is downloaded, and that's all that is being tracked by an open. So it's a good starting point. But I think that there are some metrics that are way more effective at measuring employee engagement. The read time or time on page measures how much of the content recipients are reading. So like you said, put most of the content or the most important content up at the top of the email, because people are likely only going to get through about a minute of that content. So anything longer than a minute, people probably aren't reading. But it could vary for your organization. Maybe your employees love to read. So that's why you kind of have to benchmark your own data with Polite Mail and see what your read time typically is. And then attention rate, that goes beyond just the open rate and captures who paid attention to the email or who didn't. So it looks at how many people opened the message and then at least skimmed the content, meaning they got past the subject line and into the body of the email. And so attention rate is a really good indicator of three things: your subject line, the from address that you're sending from, and the date and time that you're sending your message. So if you have a low attention rate, those are the three things we recommend looking at and tweaking to improve, how many people are getting past the subject line and into the body of the email. And then click-through rate, if you are including links in your emails. I know some people don't include links in their emails, but if you are, that's going to show you how effective the calls to action within your message are. Again, keeping that call to action right at the top is a great recommendation if you really need people to take that action. And then finally, employee feedback can collect qualitative data. So you can get, information on your employees' concerns, get suggestions. And if you are doing employee feedback, we do have a new tool called COMMlytics that will help you see employee sentiment without having to send another survey, right? Because typically people are gathering that qualitative employee feedback from sending out a survey. But with Comlytics, it works within teams. It monitors topics that are being discussed in teams, all anonymously, and can tell you how employees are feeling, either positive, neutral, or negative about different topics. So that's something we're beta testing it now. We're giving it to our customers for free to try out. If anyone's interested in trying that out, we can get you set up. So just reach out to your account manager about that.
I do want to pose a couple questions, if anyone wants to chime in. It kind of revolves around employee feedback and click-through rate. How many links are you all putting in your emails? Is the first question. And are any of you utilizing the survey feature within Polite Mail, such as the 5-star ratings or anything like that in your emails? I'm just curious to see how many people are actually utilizing those features, and how many links you guys are putting in to your emails. What a typical email would look like if you guys had links.
I will say our best practice recommendation is 1 or 2 links, which I know is hard to do. And if it's like a long form newsletter, we recommend maxing it out at, I think, like 6 to 7 links.
Right. Well, if anyone wants to just let us know, that'd be awesome. But we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, but that was a great point about the survey function that we have in Polite Mail. That's another way to get that qualitative feedback from your employees right within your email. You could do a 5-star rating question. You can have people give a like to different stories within your email, or that might be interesting to do for like a CEO newsletter, is like rate this email at the bottom and see how that does. Although might be a little biased. People, just want to please the CEO, so they all give it 5 stars. But all right, so these are here are our 6 key metrics. Are there any of them that anyone here wants me to go into more detail on, or has questions about, or they want to talk about that are important or relevant to them? I'm sure you all here are very familiar with these metrics since you've been Polite Mail customers for a while. Paul did make me think of something earlier about when he was talking about send anxiety and setting up realistic expectations. He was talking more about like how long it would take the message to send out. But I think it's also important to set realistic expectations about the metrics. So, if you're presenting the metrics to leadership, you can also present the benchmark for your industry. And that's something Polite Mail provides in a report every year. We also provide it in the actual UI of Polite Mail. So if you look in these charts here, for example, the open rate is 92% for this specific message. And then down below, the industry average benchmark open rate is 76%. So this email had an 18% higher open rate than benchmark average. And so we have that for all of our key metrics. And I think that's something really great to report on to leadership so that they know, like, especially click-through rate is historically very low. The benchmark is always around 10%. And if you presented like a 12% click-through rate to your leadership, they might be like, oh my gosh, this is so low. What are we doing wrong? But it's actually not low compared to benchmark. So again, setting those realistic expectations is really important. Now, is anyone here using campaigns for measuring their leadership communications over time?
If you are, feel free to just raise your hand if you don't want to speak. All right, got Ricky, Kim.
Nice.
Okay, bunch of people. Love it.
Good. Good. Great. I love when I talk to customers and they're using like all of the functionality of Polite Mail. Campaigns are super important for showing improvements over time. So, you know, if you start a communications plan, you can monitor it over time, or just showing like, you know, the CEO newsletter. You can create a campaign for that and show the CEO how people are interacting with it over time. Maybe you made some tweaks and you can show, you know, how that has improved everything. In the campaign reports, we break out our metrics into reach, frequency, read, and engagement. So we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm not going to get into all of these in detail. You can read the slide, but in each of these slides, we have some tips on how to improve or what impacts those different metrics that you see in a campaign report or in any of our reports that show metrics over time. So just making sure that you're optimizing those factors so that you do get the highest email reach, readership, and engagement. And then this is what I was just talking about, comparing your messages to industry benchmark, important for setting realistic expectations. And then finally, just want to touch on briefly building an executive dashboard. So another thing that you can do to get leadership on board with the data is to build them an executive dashboard. And an executive dashboard has a ton of benefits. It presents meaningful data. You want to provide narrative for what the data means. So like we talked about earlier, educating them on what the engagement rate is. For example, you can provide them like structure. Let's say you give them this report every month, then they have that to compare to month over month. And it creates a culture of measurement, accountability. It can also, as Paul was saying, he's very competitive, so it can create a competitive edge if an objective is to increase your read rate by 5% next month. I mean, a lot of leaders probably are of that also competitive mindset. So you could kind of, you know, make it a competitive thing for them and get them involved or interested in the data using that objective. So does anyone here have a executive dashboard that they've built? Do you have like a very structured way that you present the data to your leadership? And if so, any tips or ideas about like how you put it together, what it includes, how you present it to leadership, whether it's sent via an email or you have a meeting with them each month? Don't be shy. We only have 3 minutes left.
Usually just a meeting in our touch base that's already like planned, and do a little quick update.
Yeah.
Nothing too crazy.
Do you have like a format that you use every time, or you just kind of like pull up Polite Mail and show it to them?
So we have a slide, and it just has like all those data points that you shared in the previous slide. And we just share those things. And then also like number of people we sent it to and things like that.
Awesome. Well, in this deck, we do have an example of an executive dashboard. It's not specifically with like Polite Mail metrics, but it can give kind of a little structure or an idea of where to start. But we also have what we call our advanced analytics dashboard. And that is an Excel file. If you don't already have it, you can ask your account manager for it. And it's an Excel deck you connect to your data, and it's kind of already an executive dashboard put together for you. So that's at no charge to our customers. We could also probably send it out in the follow-up for this presentation. So I'll talk with our marketing team about that, because I think that'd be great for everyone to have as a starting point for putting together an executive dashboard. And we are up
Awesome.
on time. Yeah, so I don't want to
Yes.
make everyone go over, but you all have been so wonderful during this COMMSversation. I love it when, we have a lot of participation. It makes it so much more beneficial for you all. And you've been wonderful customers this year. We can't wait for you to see what we have coming out in 2026. And we'll be sending you some follow-up information based on what we've discussed here. We'll send you this deck and we'll send you the recording as well.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you,
fantastic
everyone.
Tuesday.
Bye.